Some might think that with a surname like Capsis, there is no Maltese connection at all, but there is definitely a very strong Maltese connection. Do you want to tell our viewers why?
Well, my father is Greek, but my mother is Maltese. And I was raised by my darling Nana, Angela, in Surrey Hills. So I grew up listening to Maltese my whole life, and Maltese culture, music, everything. And then as a very young child, I was completely and utterly obsessed with the island of Malta. And all I wanted to know about when I was a kid was Malta, Malta, Malta. Għajdli xi ħaġa nanna bil-Malti.
And he speaks Maltese very well.
Insomma, ngarfex daqsxejn Marlene.
Jitkellem Malti vera tajjeb.
No, mill-li nistaħej.
Għajdilna aktar in-nanna, x'kienet tgħidlek in-nanna?
So in Nana, she used to just tell me about her life in Malta, when she was a child herself, growing up in the Depression, El Guerra, and all the experiences of Malta, and about Nanno. And then I was obsessed with knowing where in Malta they were from. Where was she born? Where was my mother born? My mother was born in Gżira, and Nanna's from Nashar, and Nannu's from Rabat, El Goudia. Anyway, I miss my grandmother very much because she passed away in 2007. So, and I've noticed in the suburb of Surrey Hills, where I grew up, a lot of Maltese are no longer there. A lot of them have died, and a lot moved out in the late 70s, early 80s. So I miss all that. I miss Maltese culture.
Talking about your Nana Angela, she actually was the subject of one of your shows, Angela's Kitchen. Tell us more about that.
Well, it was my first time as a performer delving into my personal life. Up until that point, I'd always performed as other famous people, dead famous singers and actresses and stuff like that. But it was the first time that I told my story. So I came out as Maltese. I think the Australian public thought I was some exotic thing, you know. And then, of course, I told them.
Well, you're still exotic being Maltese. I
know, right? But described my life with my grandmother growing up in Malta, in Surrey Hills. And I was encouraged to write it by the great Australian director Julian Merrick, who is a colleague of mine from a very long time ago, and he met my grandmother. Yeah, and I couldn't imagine doing it because I was so close to my nana that I couldn't even contemplate the idea of speaking about her without getting emotional. And so about a year or so later, I got back in touch and I said, you know, I would like to do something to honor my grandmother's spirit, because she was an extremely special person to me and a great person in life. She was the most generous, unconditionally loving grandmother you could ever wish to have. And I know that a lot of Maltese people have had that with their nannas and nannos and their mothers and fathers. So that was the interesting thing. When I did the play, what was really surprising was how people connected to it, and not just Maltese people. I mean, for me, the great pride was the connection to the Maltese community in Australia, because we toured it everywhere. We went Brisbane, we went to Wollongong, Parramatta, Melbourne. We only did a 3-week season in Melbourne, and it sold out in a blink. And one night, I remember Joe Bandira ta Malta. They were at the end of the play. They were waving the Maltese flag. I nearly fainted. I couldn't believe it, but it was lovely. It was just extraordinary what happened around the play. People brought their whole family. Tell
us more about your beginnings, Paul. How did you happen to fall in this industry? I mean, you're renowned for one-man shows. You're renowned as a cabaret artist, as an actor, as a singer. How did you fall into this?
Gosh, I started out 33 years ago, something like that now. Absolute and utter persistence. I just had a desire to do it. I never thought I'd ever get anywhere, because from everywhere I looked around me at the time, I didn't see anyone like me on our television or on our screens. There were some people who I admired and who influenced me, but I started really at the very bottom of, you can imagine, of as a performer. I started in community theatre, amateur musical society shows, and eventually, you know, Fringe, and then It wasn't really until I started doing my own cabaret work, that's when things started to change. And I started in the theatre. And then a long circle, I ended up back in the theatre.
You are, as I said, renowned for your one-man shows. My gosh, you know, I've been to a few of your shows. I've been to see Angela's Kitchen and Little Bird. The amount of pressure that you must have on you is just incredible. Having a monologue that goes on for over an hour.
Yes.
How do you do it? Why do you love it so much?
Why I love it is a good question, because it's really hard work.
Yeah.
It's very confronting, it's difficult, but what it does is that it stretches me. Every time I've done, particularly a one-person show, it always stretches me more as a performer, because you have to be, obviously you have to learn your text, then there's the audience you deal with in the moment. You have to be really in the moment, because anything can happen. You know, when I did Angela's Kitchen in Brisbane, my last night, Kaliwi he collapsed. He was drunk in the middle of the most poignant moment of the show. And it stopped the show. People screamed. And then he had to get up, and he's holding his head. He smashed his head. And he's sitting there, and I had to stop the show and ask for him to be removed. I said, you have to take this guy to the hospital. So you are confronted with certain aspects that are out of your control as a one person. So there's the script, there's the audience, there's how you're feeling. Like lately, I've been a bit unwell. I've had a flu, and I'm doing a one-man show playing Quentin Crisp. So this is challenging in the sense that I'm playing someone completely different from me, in the sense that he was English. He was born in 1908 and he was middle class, and he speaks in a particular way that I do not speak. You know, he's very posh English. And so it's a challenge, and I guess I love the challenge. When you work on your own, it's very lonely. There's only you and your stage manager.
Yeah.
Of course, when you're on stage, you have your audience.
That's right.
And your audience either are engaged. Last night I had a lovely audience in Melbourne at the 45 downstairs, or they're quiet and they're just listening and they're not engaged. You know, there were nights in Angela's Kitchen when I could sense the audience, that there were no Maltese in the audience. You always
so they couldn't
knew.
relate, maybe.
Yes, you always knew when there was a Maltese audience, it was heaven for me, because they used to laugh and, you know, they would respond. And also there was non-Maltese who responded very positively as well.
So Paul, we're currently doing this interview in Melbourne, and you're actually doing the show right now, Resident Alien.
Yes.
But by the time that this interview goes to air, you would have just finished the show in Melbourne, but then you're taking it where?
Sydney, July. It's only on for 2 weeks at the Seymour Centre.
Seymour.
And in Canberra, the Street Theatre, where I did Angela's Kitchen in Canberra, but only for a week.
Just 1 week.
Yeah.
Paul, you're renowned also for your wigs and for your makeup. Do you find that liberating? Like you have to take on, how does it feel having to put all that makeup on and sort of, it's not hiding behind the mask, but at the same time, how do you explain that feeling?
Well, I'm playing a 90-year-old at the moment who has a comb over to rival Mr. Trump. So every night, and I went to a makeup specialist this time to teach me how to make myself look 90. And the Jojan del wrinkles are natural.
Do you do your own makeup?
I do.
No way.
Mela.
Oh,
I never used to be able to do anything, but I had to learn, because you don't often get a specialist who comes into the theatre. I've been lucky. I've had the best in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne, do my makeup, and they do transform you. For me, it's a major important thing, because when I look in the mirror and I'm playing those characters, I don't want to see me, really. Like at the moment, I'm playing Mr. Crisp. So I'm also, what I do is I draw him onto my own face. So he's certain lines sit in a different place to my line, so I draw him onto my face, and then there's so many layers, powdering, and the wig, it's a grey wig, and it's, as I said, it's a comb over from hell, but it's a major thing. And last year I did The Wizard of Oz, and I was playing the Cowardly Lion, and in the rehearsal, in the process, I developed this way of putting sticky tape over my face to make the lion look wounded and scratched. Like, this lion has had a tough time. plus I wore this massive red wig. I love the transformation. When I started out, I was a little bit obsessed with the makeup and the wigs. I like to hide. It's a similar thing that recently I've seen interviews with the late David Bowie, and he described that at the beginning of his career, he loved to be androgynous. He loved the makeup, he loved the wigs and the colouring of his hair and constantly changing his image. And then he got to about 1980s and he decided he needed to be himself, which I went through that stage in my own work, where as a singer I wanted to be me, totally me, no makeup, no wigs, and that is liberating. And in a way, Angela's Kitchen, I was stripped of that. Like, my director didn't want me in makeup, stage makeup. If you might recall, I only wear a little bit of lipstick at the end when Nanna's going to get the boat to leave Malta. That's the only time I wore a little bit of lipstick. And I had no makeup in that show, and I had short hair. And do you know how many people thought I was a woman?
Well, you played the part very well, yeah.
At the end, they'd go, "Are you a man or a woman?" I love that.
Well, that really worked then.
That was a wonderful compliment.
It's always such a pleasure to interview you.
Marlene.
And for those in Sydney and Canberra who are actually watching the show, please find out where Resident Alien is
Eva.
and when it's running.
Mela.
And I'm pretty sure Paul would say, "Ayo, dula hello."
Mela. Around here where I show